does the NSRLP have any recommendations?
We sure do. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
whole
let's get into that.
in the report.
Yeah.
Yes, you can rely on us to have
Yeah.
recommendations to the courts. Absolutely. And that was always part of the,
Right, of course.
how we pitched this to the McLaughlin Fund, was that part of this would be to develop recommendations
Good.
moving forward. So yeah, hopefully, our report gets out there widely, and the courts kind of, take some of these
That's
things to
what
heart.
I'm here for.
Good, yes. Very grateful for
Right.
you helping us spread the message in this way.
Happy to.
Um,
Go ahead.
so these are kind of all in the nutshell. Again, I would
Right.
encourage anybody to actually go to the report and read it
Right.
yourself, because there's obviously a lot more detail in there, but kind
Right.
of the bullet point list of our recommendations. So first thing, increase transparency and accountability. So this comes down to kind of addressing those trust issues. And I think it comes down to things that are as simple as making sure everybody in the Zoom or whatever Teams, whatever, knows who everybody else is,
Yeah.
making sure that everyone is properly labeled, all of those things. So help kind of establish that baseline trust of like, okay, who is
Right.
in the room
Yeah.
and they do and what their function is.
Yeah.
Addressing the digital divide. This is obviously a
Yeah.
huge issue that is
Right.
not going to be solved easily or quickly, but it needs to be a priority that the courts, if they're going to continue with virtual hearings, which obviously they are, and as I say, I think that that's not a bad thing, but they have to take into account the ways in which some people are falling through the cracks and not on an even playing field when it comes to accessing things. So again, as we've talked about, I think that goes especially for groups like persons with disabilities, uh,
Mm-hmm.
older people, people in rural
Mm-hmm.
communities who may not have reliable Wi-Fi. There's a lot of groups of people who, for whatever reason, don't have the same level of just kind of baseline access to hardware, software, Wi-Fi, comfort, familiarity, all
Yeah.
these things we talked about. So the courts need to find ways to address those.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then increased adaptability and committing to the user experience. So I think what this comes down to for us is not having a blanket procedure one way or the other. And as much as possible, and again, I know it's difficult because courts only have so much in the way of resources that they can allocate, but we have to be able to provide different types of court services where they are appropriate. So considering the type of matter, the circumstances of the people involved, there has to be some flexibility around whether or not it will be a virtual hearing and what that will look like. So, we have a couple examples in the report of ways in which a virtual hearing might be great
Mm-hmm.
for a certain group of people,
Mm-hmm.
provided that it is done in a way in which they can actually access. So we give the example of, so things like remote swearing and serving could be great for people in rural communities if they can access the technology that they need. And especially, again, that goes to reliable Wi-Fi. And
Yeah.
then we discussed in the report a little bit, again, persons with disabilities. We had kind of assumed that virtual hearings would just kind of generally be better for
Yeah.
people with disabilities. And I think they can be, depending on the disability. But for many people, they're not. A lot of persons with disabilities talked about it being kind of an increased barrier. If you're considering people who have vision impairments or auditory impairments, virtual hearings, unless they have appropriate accommodations, are not necessarily going to be better than in-person hearings. Um, and then, of course, I think this is a bit of a given, but the recommendation to address tech issues, trying to make sure, as I kind of mentioned before, that the process is as smooth and as glitch-free as possible. And where that's not possible, because as we said, tech issues always come up, there need to be systems in place where courts are providing support. And we kind of talk about what we think would be great is, yes, IT support, kind of having a tech person there to help specifically, self reps through a
Mm-hmm.
process. But we think it would be great if that could be a role that is not only kind of IT support, but also just kind of support in general. So somebody, a person that is identified before the hearing process that self-reps know who they are, that they can go to get perhaps tips, to get a little bit of training, I guess, if they're not familiar with whatever the platform is or what the process will look like. Somebody they can go to with questions about the process. And then that person presumably, hopefully, would also be on the call on the day of the hearing itself, so that if there are technical problems encountered, that person can be there to help address them for all sides, really. And then providing information. So this is a big one. And we really found, we did a bit of a mini scan across the country of courts and what they currently provide in terms of instruction or guidelines around how to participate in virtual hearings for self-represented litigants. Some had some really great resources that were prominently posted or perhaps sent immediately to self-represented litigants ahead of their virtual hearing. Some courts had nothing at all. So there's a big gap across the country in terms of what is out there for self-reps. And we think obviously that all courts should make it a priority to provide clear, succinct information and make it very accessible, both, prominently on websites, but also I think they should probably all have a package that is automatically sent to any public participants in virtual hearings to kind of like, okay, this is the platform that will be used. You want to make sure you do these things before the hearing. This is how you use this platform. This is the way things will go. This is the person you can contact to get some tech support or whatever. So greater information around these processes is really important. And one of the things that we found at least one court does, I don't know if they do it for every case, but they provide dry runs of virtual hearings, which we thought that's great. And I mean, obviously that's not necessarily necessary or appropriate in every context or for every self-represented litigant. But certainly that's something that I think a lot of courts should look into as a possibility of service to give people kind of that dry run before the actual day of the hearing. And then finally, we recommend that courts figure out how to allow support persons or Mackenzie friends when it comes to self-represented litigants. Surely there's a way to do that. They're allowed in-person hearings, and so it's only fair that we figure out how those people can participate in virtual processes as well.
I was just thinking about the digital divide again, and administrative tribunals are supposed to be accessible to just lay people, I guess, to self-represented litigants,
Yeah.
and yet I believe that they're still mostly online, which is so
Well,
interesting.
the big example is the Ontario Landlord Tenant Board.
Yes,
That they went I guess pretty much across
completely.
the board. Everything was online.
Yes.
And from what we're hearing, and we
Yeah.
did, so we did what most of our focus groups were with self-represented litigants, but we did do one focus group with kind of legal professionals. And a couple of those people on that focus group were people involved with the Ontario Landlord Tenant Board. And yeah, their sense of how that is going is not great.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and from what we understand, I mean, I think technically there is a process by which people can request to not have their hearing online, but my understanding is that almost never is that granted, that most people it's just the default, you have to appear virtually.
Yeah.
And our understanding is that it is not going well.
Yes. It
Yeah.
almost seems like what I thought would be a great advantage is almost like turning out to be, this is not really something you really want necessarily
Oh,
at
and
the end of the day.
I think if virtual hearings are done well and thoughtfully,
Yeah.
I think they absolutely, for a lot of people, could be an advantage and could be a much better experience for a
Yeah.
lot of self reps. But the problem is that they're not
Mm,
necessarily always being
I'm not
done,
quite there yet.
yeah, in
Yeah,
the
it's
best
not
possible
quite
way.
that reliable.